Well, good afternoon, everybody. Um, I know I'm the last speaker before lunch, which is always the best place to be when everyone's getting hungry, so I will definitely stay on time to keep everybody happy. Um, I think it's interesting being up here and sort of reflecting. I'm not an entrepreneur, I don't have an LLC, um, but I have worked with a lot of small businesses from the university perspective over my career. And so I have some stories to share and some observations about higher education that I want to share with you in ways that I think would potentially be valuable to you. But I do also have a challenge for you coming at the end. So I want to preface that. I have a challenge for you in the way that we think about higher education as we move forward. A little bit about me. I have, I have a PhD. I have other things, but the number one thing, the number one name I get called all the time is Dad. That's actually the most frequent way people refer to me is Dad, and that's because I'm a proud father of 8 children, and that's really my grounding source. So we talked a lot in this room about grounding sources, and that's mine. That's really my identity. It's also, when you have 8 children, a great way to learn patience and how to deal with humans in the workplace, because when you have a family that size, they can throw a lot at you. So let me see here if I can. Green button. So let's talk about higher education a little bit. And so where did higher education start? So I know a lot of times, the ambassador was kind enough to show us some of the garb that he had to get dressed up in during his career. I think most of us have probably been to a ceremony where all the faculty members get dressed up in all the colorful, funny-looking stuff, and we all go parading around, and everybody thinks it's great. What you don't know is those things are incredibly hot and it's super uncomfortable, and the faculty generally don't like it very much. But the roots of it are in this tradition of sort of a monastic type of education where you would oftentimes have this big hood on the back of your garb, and as you turned your back, you would actually collect things like payments into that hood. And so now if you have a master's degree or a doctoral degree, you get hooded, and it's part of that tradition. So we started in sort of that space, and then we evolved a little bit. In 1088, this is largely recognized as the oldest university in the world, the University of Bologna. We started this more formal thing, and we've been kind of doing a lot of the same stuff since 1088, which is interesting when you're in an industry that's kind of static and you're in a room full of entrepreneurs who are doing things that are sort of much more fast-paced. But we've been kind of just sticking to this tried and true formula of educating students in sort of a traditional fashion since a lot of these universities started. Right? We can go forward to the United States of America. A little bit of a debate between William and Mary and Harvard, which one started first. This is a picture of Harvard, but we'll let you all figure out which one of those may or may not be the oldest. But right around the mid-1600s, this is where this tradition kind of starts in the United States, and we start to see some of the older universities pop up. We later have the Morrill Acts that come in and start the universities that a lot of us are familiar with and may have attended. The land grant institutions that are like the University of Florida, Florida State, and this state, or other states, Michigan State University, different places that you may be familiar with. And since then, there's been tremendous growth in this industry. We have seen particularly trends that we have more college graduates, more university completions, and a lot of it was a huge jump in this that came in the United States after the passage of the GI Bill, where a lot of people took advantage of those resources to go back to university and become educated. So we've had greater educational attainment in recent history than we've ever had in higher education prior. So that's sort of where we've been at moving up. Now we're starting to see a little bit of a shift. Right, now what we're starting to see is universities talking about things like enrollment cliffs, where we're starting to see the number of high school graduates decline in a lot of states across the union. In fact, there's really only 2 states in the union that are showing very strong trends in upward growth in high school graduates. And we're starting to see a lot of small colleges go underwater. Right now, I think it's about 1 every month that we lose from the ranks of higher education. These tend to be our smaller private university partners that have less than 2,000 students. Those seem to be the ones that are the most susceptible. So we're seeing a little bit of an inverse trend at the moment in terms of how higher education is moving. One of our other challenges is our value proposition, right? And interestingly enough, academics or people in higher education don't get up in a room and talk to people like you all very often. We talk to ourselves, and honestly, if I was talking to a room full of colleagues, I'd have like 400 more slides. They have a ton of graphs on them because that's kind of our comfort zone, right? We like our data and our graphs and our PowerPoints, and so this is it's different for us to be in a room like this talking to all of y'all. Right, so our value proposition is being challenged, and that's known, right? I mean, you pick up the newspaper, you read it, you know that that's happening, right? Speed and cost to degree. We now have a couple universities that have launched 3-year bachelor's degrees, right? Speed, time to degree, cost, etc. And we've seen a rise in individuals wanting to do micro-credentialing, different types of degrees, and then we have the ever-present looming threat of AI. Right? Now, I will tell you, I'm not as worried about that last one, right? The universities, we made it through COVID. We made it through the advancement of online education. We're going to make it through artificial intelligence too. We've had a reaction to it. Now we're working with it, and actually most universities now have pivoted to the point where we're figuring out how to teach students to use it effectively as a tool, because that's where they're going to be at. So we had our moment has passed, and now we're working with it as a tool and trying to help students become educated on it. But the challenge to our value proposition is real. It is a real threat, and it's the first time, really, if you were a professor in the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, and you walked into a room, there was really no challenge to the value proposition of what you provided. That is not true today, and it's something that we as academics need to do a better job of speaking about when we're out in public. All right, so this is where I want to challenge you a little bit, and I'll talk about entrepreneurial engagement with universities here in just a bit, but what have we forgotten? Well, what we have forgotten is that we're so focused on that momentary transition between what do I need immediately to enter the workforce versus what do I need 5 or 10 years down the road to be sustainable within an organization, to move into maybe a middle management position, to become a leader in that organization. We're so focused on that momentary transition from university educated to initially employed that we forget about how do we set up that person to have longevity inside of an organization. And that is a big problem. Because when we go out and we talk to human resource groups, and we do that, I have human resource people across the area around where I'm at in Pensacola, and I talk to them and I ask them, hey, what do our students need to do better at? Right? And the first thing they tell me is they need more nurses, because that's pretty common. Like if you're a dean of a health sciences college, that's like the number one thing you hear every time. I need more nurses. I need more anything in the medical field. But on the backside of that, the next thing they tell me is I need them to be able to be civil. I need them to be able to understand how to navigate the workforce. I need them to be able to communicate. I need them to be able to move into management positions eventually. I need them to have some of these better things, these skills. A lot of times they'll classify them as soft skills. I don't really like that term. I think they're more durability skills. They're skills that you need to acquire through education, sometimes through life experience too. It doesn't always have to come through university, but through education. Oftentimes, they make you durable in an organization. They set you up to be able to ladder up within that organization, provide value just beyond the initial skill set that you bring to the table. And that's important, and it's something that I would challenge you to think about, is that there are going to be those individuals that you hire that have groundings in philosophy and history, art history, religious studies, other factors. They teach them how to think, they teach them how to react, they teach them how to engage with peers, people, communicate, and they teach them the basic skills they need to move into leadership positions. We've lost a little bit of that, and I think where we're seeing that right now is the pain point in finding middle managers who know how to navigate the hierarchy within organizations. Right? And we also have forgotten that universities are largely our cultural centers. Right? A lot of the arts, the history, the culture that exists in communities, they're all rooted a lot in universities. And that provides a tremendous value. So our value proposition goes beyond the classroom. Right? We are finding these struggles, and we find them now more so, I think, in some capacities. I know remote work has come up a bunch of times, and yes, Amazon made its announcement, and they're not the only ones. But when we pivoted the university during COVID to online education, right, we created a disconnected group of students. And those disconnected groups of students have now moved out into the workforce, and they're sort of disconnected from colleagues now in remote work situations. And so just as there's talk going on about that, there's also talk going on in university settings as well. And so I challenge you, think about some of these things. Think about not just that skill. So when I talk to small businesses and we talk about what are their workforce needs, oftentimes the first thing I'll hear is one particular software package the student needs to be familiar with, one particular type of analytical technique, one skill set, one attribute from the student. Right? But then that student can only do one thing. Right? That's it. End of the road. They can do that one thing for you. Right? So look a little bit beyond that. Start to think about, how does that well-rounded component of education filter forward into an organization? How are you going to, what do you need to look for, not just for that first moment in time where they join your organization, but where they're going to go next for you. Right? And in addition to that, think about universities as a partner. I have had, probably 30 or 40 different engagements of all different types with small businesses around the country. Right? All from Colorado to just different places. Universities are great partners with small businesses, particularly with entrepreneurs. We have groups of students that would love to engage with you all. Right? We had at the university just recently a CEO of a small business that was a startup. He's working with a group of our students in a class project. He's working on a project that he doesn't have the bandwidth to do in his organization himself. He doesn't have the employees. He doesn't have the skills. He doesn't have the capacity to do it. But as soon as he partnered with the university in what is essentially a free process, he's able to expand the work that he's doing. He's able to help educate the generation of students in things that go beyond the classroom and provide value back to himself and his startup, but also provide value forward to the next generation of students, teach them a little bit about entrepreneurship. So I would challenge you, reach out. I would challenge you to think a little bit differently about higher education. Think about where people are going to go in their future, and help us navigate this time a little bit. Help us have a conversation with groups like you all to talk a little bit about the value proposition of higher education and how we can change that and work together for the future. So I wanted to thank you all for spending the time with you today. It's this amazing group of people to talk with. I'm so blessed to have been in this room with you today. And I will make sure that my comment in here so everyone can head off to lunch.